Hello, everyone. I'm Raza Kazmi. I work as a conservation communicator with WCT. Today, we are delighted to have a forest officer amidst us in our company, and it is a forest officer who has played a key role in shaping the conservation scenario in Assam, especially. That is Dr. Sonali Ghosh. She is currently the field director of Kaziranga Tiger Reserve. Before I begin our conversation with Dr. Ghosh, I would like to give a small introduction to her. Dr. Sonali Ghosh is a distinguished Indian Forest Service officer of the 2000 batch. She belongs to the Assam and Meghalaya cadre. With over 25 years of expertise in forestry and wildlife governance, she has successfully managed two UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Kaziranga and Manas National Parks, and is a founding faculty member of the Wildlife Institute of India's Category 2 Center for World Natural Heritage in Asia and the Pacific. Holding a PhD in remote sensing technology from the United Kingdom, Dr. Ghosh also serves as the regional vice chair of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, contributing significantly to global heritage and transboundary conservation initiatives. Having lived and worked extensively across Northeast India as both an inquisitive researcher and a passionate naturalist, she had authored over 50 peer-reviewed publications, including 2 books. Deeply committed to dispelling myths about the region's natural resources, she currently serves as the field editor of Kaziranga National Park and CEO of the Assam Agroforestry Development Board. Welcome, ma'am, to this program, and we know each other for a long time now, but I'm really delighted to be able to formally speak to you through this platform and maybe ask you quite a few questions that I always had in mind for, that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm sure others would find it equally interesting. Shall I begin with the first question and then we can take the conversation forward?
Yes. No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Raza, for, inviting me. I mean, like you said, it's really a pleasure to be on this session with you. I mean, I think all that you read about me, the same goes for you. The admiration is, mutual for all the good work that you do. And thank you so much for having me here, and happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, so I was wondering that you are one of those rare individuals in the field of Indian conservation, and few people might know of this, but you are one of those few people who has transitioned from being a wildlife researcher to a wildlife manager. You were a student at the Wildlife Institute of India before joining the Indian Forest Service. So how has your perspective changed from your days as an MSc student at WII to a field officer in the Indian Forest Service when it comes to looking at the forest and wildlife, as well as the way forest and wildlife are managed?
Yeah, no, thank you, Raza. Actually, if I may, sort of share this with you. I was part of the Masters in Wildlife Institute way back in 95. We were the 5th batch. And prior to us, they were, the Wildlife Institute started the master's courses when I think the country was transitioning into having its own expertise into fundamental wildlife sciences, and of course, now we have several other colleges and universities offering wildlife, but at that time there were probably just 2, if I may remember, ANU and WII, which kind of gave it under Saurashtra University, of course, and Baroda. So there were very few colleges. And our batch was the 5th batch, as I said. And if I may recollect, I remember one of the times during the masters, we had H.S. Pawasa, who was also one of the founders for WII. He sort of, mentioned that, the master's course, which was very exclusive, it still is. It's like once in 2 years, and we had a batch of just less than 10 people. Was very exclusive, but he mentioned it that we are not looking at people. I mean, we are not doing this course because we want you to all get jobs or, things like that. But it is to do fundamental, pure sciences related to wildlife. And it was a very happening time that time, because we had a lot of researchers who are now so-called, I would say, stalwarts in their own right, doing research that time. Of course, we had Dr. John Singh, AJT John Singh, we had Dr. Raghu Chundawat, Dr. Ravi Chelam, Dr. Jhala. All of them were like, people who had just finished their PhDs on fundamental sciences and, coming in. So it was that time, it was that bustling time that sort of, shaped the way we were. But I would say personally that I was probably one of those, the odd sheep out. I think I was happy to be, going into the fundamental sciences, but at the same time, I was much more inclined towards applied research, and that's why I did my master's. My dissertation work was looking at grassland burning, the impact of the grassland burning on the flora and fauna in Corbett. So I guess I was anyway inclined towards that, and I was able to then, of course, so I had sort of made up my mind that maybe I would like to do more of the applied, and that is exactly what has sort of been a different path or trajectory that I've taken from the rest of the master students at WII. And but having said that, I think what I could say is that after 28 years now, since I did my master's, I can say that I appreciate it better. I see myself as a site manager, as a person, with policy framing role, but my grounding with the masters at WII gives me a better perspective, and it gives me that impetus to influence policy in a much better manner, in a much informed manner than the rest. Yeah.
That is very insightful. And maybe my second question flows from the earlier question, that often one of the bickering points between forest department and researchers is that, they don't see the forest that the way we do, or the other side will say that managers will complain that the scientists don't understand our limitations and the problem that we face in managing these forests. So I was wondering, because you have worn both hats in your life, so how do you think can researchers and non-governmental organizations collaborate better with the forest department? What are some of the things researchers should be cognizant of, and what would be some of the things forest officers could keep in mind when researchers approach them?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Raza, about this. I think this issue or this conflict situation between researchers or NGOs versus the government is something which is perhaps not new, and it is across sectors. It could be not just in the forestry and wildlife sector, it could be in the social sector, it could be in other areas as well. I think more prominently it gets featured in our forestry wildlife sector, because we are so much data driven in terms of getting the information and then acting into policies. I think the biggest challenge is that we work in silos. We have this, if the forest department is working, we do not know what the district administration is into, or their schemes. We look at their welfare schemes as a impediment to our conservation. The same goes for the researchers. The scientist or a researcher, when they come to the field, let's say a fish researcher, the fish researcher would only be concerned about the fish. They would not be concerned about the tigers or for that matter, the flora. I mean, you ask them anything, they'll say, we are fish people, we don't know anything about it. So the same happens with the forest people. And I think this desalloization is something which is constantly being suggested across departments. I think there needs to be a sort of a desalloization between researchers, academic institutions, NGOs, and the department, which is very, very important, very tough to do, but possible if we have active, policies which bring them together. The same for the department. I think we get very insecure. If there is somebody coming in doing research, we always think, oh, there will be some fault finding, which will happen because of the research which will go in. So there needs to be a little more trust building, a little more, transparency in the way research permits are given. Maybe it can be more simplified. And I'm assuming many good states have it. Many states probably have a very defined system of, okay, you apply, you get your, sort of a code that, okay, you've applied for this project and we'll let you know. They have a research advisory committee in place, and then, it is taken care of. So I guess what the researchers need to keep in mind is that activism between and research, there is a very thin line. And so sometimes when young people go in, they should just sort of focus only on the research and not be concerned about, that, okay, we are here to change the world and, all that. I guess it's just pure research. Whether you get good or bad results is later on. And the same goes for the forest people. I think we need to have more accountability ourselves in terms of, why we do not permit or we permit research. And there should be a feedback mechanism. There should also be a sort of mechanism where the research requirements of a park or of a site manager is considered by the academic institution and vice versa. So, many times researchers have their own way of looking at things, so they say, okay, we want to come and look at, let's say, we want to look at the animal corridors in Kaziranga and we want to understand. Now, that is something from a researcher's point of view. Maybe the forest officer wants a research immediately on the conflict, or on that, how many elephants are going out and where are they going, and, what are the patterns of that. So there is a mismatch between what is the requirement of the department and what the researchers are looking at. And having said that, I would say that it's a lot better, I would say, especially with transparency, more of accountability. Many states now, as I said, have their research committees and systematically are able to, give the connect with the researchers. Yes.
That I think is very important. I think the point that you mentioned about feedback, and both the researchers also understanding maybe that there might be a few questions of research that might be more important from a management point of view, that might that might be quite helpful. I think this need for having a dialogue is very perhaps important. I'm not sure if any state has that. Maybe I've always wondered if there could be a body of, a committee which has some researchers and some forest officers who are there on a permanent body and are always discussing these questions. Perhaps some of the sticking points could be ironed out. But the point that you mentioned are absolutely, perhaps I couldn't have answered them better. Moving on from research to Assam, and I would perhaps want to know, it's a long time when you think of it. You've been working in Assam for a quarter of a century, if you put it that way. So, do you feel that the outlook of the forest department towards wildlife conservation has evolved over the years? And if yes, how so? how different is the forest department of 2025 compared to the one that you joined in 2000?
Yeah, okay. Yes, certainly. I think quarter of a century is a long time. It does. It has changed. And if I may sort of, expand this response to all India, the pan India, I mean, as the Forest Service, I mean, although it's like more than 150 years old, if you look at imperial, but even if you see the way the IFS is sort of now structured, I mean, probably we are the 1960s is when it was revived and people got in, but the first woman came in only in 1980. So 1980 is the time when you had three women qualify for the Indian Forest Service, and that too because they changed the technical sort of requirements for entry into the service. So on a personal level, and in terms of the overall lookout, I would say clearly, yes, there has been a difference in the way we are, looking at forest, the department, the service, and all that. Having gone to, in terms of how wildlife conservation has been impacted, clearly, I think the sort of the Waterloo or, the sort of this had been the Sariska, debacle. That was 2005, Raza? I think, yes,
So,
2004, 5, yes.
what right?
So, yes. So, I think that itself changed the way we looked at wildlife conservation, from a very standard pug mark census technique to camera trap or to mark recapture techniques, and saying that, okay, we need more robust estimations. I think that is a sort of a breakthrough that we were able to achieve in the last quarter of a century. And since we did that for tigers, we sort of, it snowballed into several other aspects. So, like, for example, the use of end stripes or patrolling apps to understand that where are we, where the front line are moving for protecting the forest, or for that matter, using technology from camera traps to sensor based to, things like that. So I think the wildlife conservation scene with better research. And that's why, I link it to the WII time. It's like sort of co-evolved. We had the fundamental sciences, the wildlife sciences evolving at that time. We also had, so by the time, the 2004 and 5, we had enough evidence to back up our wildlife conservation policies and say that, okay, these are better methods, these are better. Because unless we know what we are protecting, it is difficult to sort of implement the policy. So now for sure, we can say that at least for our megafauna, at least for of the main charismatic or let's say endangered species, we have the mechanisms of how do we manage them, So to protect them, we do have that bit of surveillance, which was not there earlier when I had joined into the service. We were still sort of, okay. I remember that we were still taught the plaster cast of the Padma, which is still done, of course, but it's not the only one, So I think that is a very welcome and a positive step that currently our wildlife conservation methods are probably world class, compared to the rest of the world. And I think we would be at par with in terms of the science behind wildlife conservation. And as I said, for the department, the inclusion of women, the fact that, yes, okay, it's not just about, it's not considered as something where, you can have only the macho-ness or the romanticism of males, being there. So I think, but still a lot many reforms are required. For example, we are still only as a service, we are only open to science and engineering and so on, which I don't see why it cannot be open for social sciences as well. It really doesn't matter because it's a very multifarious job as a forest officer. So maybe these are still some of the reforms that are required. But having said so, I think we are getting there. Yeah.
That is absolutely spot on, as I would say. The point that you've mentioned. So I think and because we're talking of the forest department, so the forest department as an institution often gets a lot of flack from all quarters. Media also isn't often very happy with it. Researchers for their, have their growls and complaints. Conservationists have their complaints. The local communities have their conflicts, and even the politicians are not very happy with the department most of the time. As someone who has seen the departments working as closely as you have, and then I can say this because I have seen the departments working quite closely due to my father. I'm of the opinion that sometimes the criticisms are justified, sometimes the criticisms are absolutely misplaced. So, what would be, because you when you speak as a forest officer, and with many people who will be listening to this who may not be familiar with the inner workings of the department, what would be some of the things you would like the audience to know regarding the forest department's work and contribution towards conservation of wildlife, both historically and current times, and when we sometimes pass off uh, uh, you know criticisms, what are sometimes the things to keep in mind before passing those criticisms?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not easy. The criticisms are there, but at the same time, I would also say that the adulations are also there. But yes, I mean, if I have to convince the general public about what have we done, what have we given back to our nation, I would say, whereas in which country you would have the world's largest population of the greater one-horned rhino, the world's largest population of the Bengal tigers, the elephants, buffaloes, name it. And India has these charismatic megafauna present in our country. And if you look at it, compare it in the South Asian context, and despite the fact that we are also one of the second highest human population in the world, so I guess it is not just not because of the forest department, but let us also give the credit to the forest, because saving these species or setting aside areas for these wildlife has been one of the biggest strength of our country and of our service. From the fact that when we started after independence, and now we should have easily around 600 plus protected areas, 58 tiger reserves. We also have conservation reserves, community reserves. So this is not something which has been done because of only the let's say the communities or the political will, but it's also because of the forest people who are the day and night or relentlessly protecting these species. And in this, I think the full credit, of course, goes to the front line, to the forest front line, who are actually working under challenging circumstances. So that, I think, is very important. The second, which is very oft forgotten, and which is something which has possibly not been spoken of in many forums, is the ex situ conservation bit, Raza. And this is another very, very fascinating story about India and the forest department. At the start of in the post-independent era, there were more than, I would say, 700 to 800 of zoos and menageries and private zoos, circuses, and so on. So it was one of the biggest animal welfare movement in the world, I would say. That from then to now, we have literally closed down, all the bad zoos and, private, the menageries and the circuses and sort of shutting down of endangered animals being showcased in circuses. So this is another great achievement of our country, of our policies, of our Wildlife Protection Act, that was also helping in animal welfare. Right now, we have roughly around 150 recognized zoos and rescue centers across the country. But from the time it was in the pre-independent era to now, there is a lot of change in animal welfare has happened the way we would perceive for wildlife conservation.
That is very interesting. That is something that I have also not thought much about. So I'm glad you brought that point of closing down so many zoos, especially at a time when you look at the West, keeping animals in as private property and having private zoos, it's something that has only boomed in the recent years.